Hi, Andy.
I wanted to show the rain because it's so rare.
Oh, nice.
Just for everyone that joined us, just to like explain the format a little bit, we are going to get a tour of Julia's studio, and hopefully we don't lose connection as we see the outside. But Cami, Gus, and I will sort of be asking questions and just keeping it conversational as we move through the studio. And then at the end, or at any point really, feel free to like type in questions and we can read those out. And then at the end, we'll also leave some time, and you can either type things in then or unmute yourself and just ask out loud.
Cool. We have rain here in Brooklyn too.
Yeah, but it's not so exotic as it is in Los Angeles.
Oh.
We get excited and freak out when there's rain here. It's on the news, you know, when there's rain.
Nice.
I wanted to show the parking lot. I don't know why, but I wanted to show the building, but my internet cuts out if I go too far that way. So I can at least start by showing you the common space where I have the kilns if you want.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I keep on flipping. So this is like this general wood shop / shared common space. One of my studio mates, there's like 4 of us in this studio space. We all have separate studios. One's there, mine's over there, there's one there, there's a couple more down that way. We have the shared space. There's 2 of us in here that do ceramics. These are my kilns. I love them very much. There's a big one, there's a medium one, and there's a small one. And they're okay. I really, this one like holds a lot, but I don't know if you guys have experience with this size of scut model. It's a great kiln, but it's like I have to dive down into it to load it.
Totally.
Like,
yeah, we have 2 of those.
Top, climb in a lot of times.
Yeah, we have 2 of those at BKLYN CLAY in there.
I have a ladder, you know, it's.
Yeah. And always like a little soft brick on your shirt.
Oh, yeah.
That comes away with you. You're like,
yeah, it's a mess in there. Like it's a mess. This is how I take care of my kilns, but
that's so private.
So
yeah, that's like asking someone to open their closet or something.
I have nothing to hide. So yeah, those are the kilns. So they're not giant, but they do the job. And when I make things that are bigger than that, then I fire them at a school, either that I'm teaching at, or like I fired some stuff at Cal State Long Beach when I was like I taught there and was a visiting resident person. And then we have some kilns at USC I use sometimes, or I could use. So yeah, that's our hallway.
Julia, where are you in relation to the city and like the areas that you're teaching at?
I'm in Northeast Los Angeles in this area that's like, it's kind of like Glassell Park, near Glendale, near Atwater Village. So those are like the neighborhoods, and Glendale's a city. So it's like Northeast. It's about, I don't know, 5 miles from USC, which shouldn't take that long, but it often takes, you know, with traffic, like 45 minutes or so. But it's about 3 miles from my house. I live in Echo Park, so it's an easy commute, especially now.
How long have you been in this space?
We've been here since 2014.
Oh, cool.
So kind of a long time now. Before that, I was moving studios every year since I graduated, basically. Since I went to Cal State Long Beach for my MFA, and in 2010 I graduated, and then I moved studios every year after that, which is hard to do with clay work. So I'm happy to have been here for a long time now.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can stay for a while. I don't know. Kind of depends. Like real estate is pretty hot in LA right now, and we don't own this place, so we'll see. So anyway, let me continue with I can ramble for hours, but I'll show you a tour. This is my entryway to my studio. This is my glaze mixing zone. So I've accumulated a bunch of dry materials that I mix glazes with. Here's my mason stain zone. And here's my very fancy glaze mixing area.
Yeah.
It consists of a scale and, when necessary, a scoop.
Very scientific.
Huh?
It's very science lab.
Yes, very, very. I mean, I have a dust mask too. And then I have some accumulation of textile paraphernalia up here. So I'll often just test glazes on little mini maquettes. I usually forget to make like real textiles. And so by the time I want to like test the glaze, I'll be like, oh crap, what am I going to test it on? So I'll find like a piece of something. And so I'll try to like this piece was another piece that I broke on purpose so that then I could use the inside of it for textiles. It's fairly resourceful, actually. And yeah, so then I have this space that kind of opens up to a nice big space, and I have a little loft up there that sometimes I sit in and kind of observe the situation.
Do you just have a chair up there, Julia?
Yeah. There's a chair and some stuff.
Nice.
But
Is it a
I
rocking
use
chair?
this. What?
Is it a rocking chair?
No,
Oh.
that would be great. I would love that, but it's not. It's just like a normal sitting chair.
Those are good too.
Yeah. So okay. Sorry. Let's see. I have this piece this is from last year. So this is like the one kind of big piece I have in my studio right now. Everything else is in storage or at the gallery. And so this piece is part of a series that I made for a show last year. There were a lot of pieces that were pretty large, and this idea of like intersecting hands or combs and hair, or both in this case. So this is a big one, and then after that I started working more on like small scale again, or relatively small scale, I guess, like more normal scale.
Let's call that New York studio scale.
Yeah, exactly. It's normal scale if you're not at a giant kiln in Southern California. So I don't know, do you want to kind of give you like an overall?
Yeah.
I feel a little overwhelmed and I don't know where to
Yeah,
focus.
you're doing great.
Okay. So I try to break everything up into sections in my studio because otherwise I feel a little nuts. So I have like the finished zone over here that I try to keep clean, but relative. I have drawings. I have my like drawing area because I draw as a big part of my work. And then I have the like in progress zone that gets kind of messy. So I have these that I'm building and carving now. I have this in progress. I'm making like a mirror frame for my house. And then here's another one that like needs to be finished carving. I'm carving it, but it's taking forever. And then I have some this is that same clay, but after it's fired to cone 5. And then I'm gonna glaze them with low fire glazes actually. So I do like a cone 5 mid-range once fire because I like the color of the clay. And then I use I have a kind of assortment of low fire glazes that I will paint or, apply on top of them. But it is kind of like painting. I think of them like I'm trying to use them sort of as like watercolors. And so then I'll get like through layering and applying things and multiple firings. Sometimes I'll get like results such as these.
Do you find yourself working in like bodies of work, or you just like, or do you continuously like push through?
Yeah, I usually work on a few things at a time because I'm impatient, and ceramics is something that I guess it takes a lot of patience. So to balance that, I work on several at once so I can kind of keep going without ruining a piece. So I'll do a little bit on one, I'll do a little bit on another, and just kind of rotate around. So that's another, that reminds me of why I've built my studio this way as well. Like I have all these kind of little tables and then like a chair on wheels with the idea that I could kind of roll around and like work on things sort of like in a production line. And I think the other reason I do that is because I have a lot of things I want to make. I have a lot of things I want to see, and I have to make them if in order to know if they're going to be good or not. Like I can draw, I can plan, I can think about them, but I won't know until I actually see the sculpture. And so if I just did like one thing at a time and like each one was like really precious while I was building it, I would just like not have enough time to see each idea through. I still don't, just because, life is short and time is precious. But
do you find yourself in a place where you're like, yeah, this idea is garbage?
Oh yeah, a lot. And sometimes it happens after I fire the thing multiple times, and then I'll be like, well, that didn't work, and it goes in the dumpster. And yeah, that sucks, but it's like it's become kind of like a regular part of my practice, for better or for worse. I feel like if I try to like avoid that, I just end up hitting a wall, and I need to just like kind of embrace that as part of the process of finding the good ones. It's like editing. It's just like a kind of long process of editing.
Yeah.
Julia, it seems like the work used to be way more based in mixed media, and it seems like it's really moved to like ceramics.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, was that a conscious decision, or is it something that just sort of happened?
It sort of happened because I work in these like kind of series, and like one idea leads to the next in this really like kind of organic and intuitive way. And in retrospect, I kind of see that it happened more. I started working in clay more once I had my own kiln set up, and I had more control over where I was firing, how I was firing, and didn't really have to like share that with anybody. And I think that cleared the way for me to work in ceramics more. And I also think that I'm starting to see a lot of my old work that was using like wood and wire and metal, a lot of found objects. I was kind of seeing that now as maybe like sketches for current stuff that's starting to maybe make those forms, but out of clay.
Okay.
But just like long ago sketches. And actually I was looking at old sketches, like actual sketches from like 2013 when I was making those sculptures that were like multiple things stacked together. And I was kind of seeing these now maybe as like ideas to start making out of all clay and kind of see how that would work. So like in an old piece, maybe this would be metal and like porcelain things coming down and epoxied together. And so now I'm thinking like maybe I'll try to make something like this, but all out of clay. And I don't exactly know why. I think part of it is like trying to make things look separate, but having them all be out of one material and all one piece is really interesting conceptually for me. So rather than my old work that was all these separate parts coming together, now I want to make it look like separate things, but have it all one cohesive piece.
Yeah, I used to really often show your work to students because like the pieces that you had on your rooftop a long time ago that stacked together, like that was such a big thing that I would show students that would talk about like being limited by kiln size and things like that. But now you've sort of just moved into trying to figure out how to, so like that big piece that's in your studio, like just logistically, how are you gonna, do you have to move that piece to fire it then?
Oops. I wanted to flip this so I could show you that again. It's already fired.
Okay.
So I made it and fired it at Cal State Long Beach last year in one of their massive kilns. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I sort of like, I have this whole belief system of like making things in parts. Like I really like the politics and the philosophy behind like making things in parts and having them come together. But now I'm finding that I want to make work that is more one big cohesive thing, at least for now, which is an interesting kind of like problem, I think, to find myself in. I think it has a good side view.
Yeah.
Sometimes you like get attached to the material. Like sometimes you get attached to like metal, and then you like know how to use that thing, and then it becomes sort of easy. And so then that's how I, when I think of like, oh, I can just do this out of metal, and it'll be so much easier than to make this a big thing, a big arch out of clay, which would be really difficult.
Yeah, and I think I also just get bored when I do the same thing too much. So like any routine of working feels not exciting after a certain amount of time doing so. So like I was making these big assembled pieces and they had a lot of different ways of working within them, which I think was why it was exciting at first. I was sewing, I was like epoxying, I was doing ceramics, but then even that became sort of like a formula after a certain amount of time, and that just wasn't exciting anymore. So I think part of my work as an artist is to keep like trying to reinvent like what to do, which is like really kind of exhausting, but also satisfying when I can figure out the next thing,
Yeah.
Can you talk about like your relationship with the body in your work? Because it kind of floats in and out of parts.
Yeah, I think all of my work is pretty bodily. It's just not maybe like representationally bodily necessarily. used to, in undergrad, I went to UC Davis, and that's where I started doing ceramics with Annabeth Rosen. And I only made figurative work. I only wanted to make like ladies, like big kind of emotional, gestural, Matisse inspired, very like inspired by Akio Takamori figures. And kind of like this drawing, these are my swimming drawings, kind of stuff like this, but made out of clay. And when I went so I've always been interested in the body and anatomy, and I did gymnastics for a really long time growing up, and I think that, I don't know, it made me think about the body in a more, I don't know, in a different way. And just like different ways, like conscious of like body language and how things, like how we use our bodies for expression and stuff like that. So then in grad school, I stopped making actual figures, but everything still has this like very bodily feel, whether it's like the interior of a body, like viscera, or like sometimes now I'm bringing back some more representational stuff like hands interlocking, or they're also like, I don't really want them to be like hands only. Like I like having them be somewhat abstract still. So I try to not make them clearly hands. I'll only make like 4 fingers to try to make them a little bit more abstract. I don't know. For now, that's what I'm doing. This is like a volcano with arms reaching out. So sometimes, especially lately, things have been getting a little bit more figurative again, but in kind of like more of a cartoony way than in the past. So the body's always there. I think about it a lot.
Can we see, I think you posted a really nice like clip a little while ago with the like the piece that you're carving.
Yeah.
Can we see that up close?
Yeah, so I've been doing this woven sgraffito thing on a lot of my pieces. It started back in 2017. I did a show of all these infinity signs with different motifs carved on, and I made a glossary of terms and symbols that went along with it. So one of those terms is the weaving, or woven, or weave, and I've been carving it into this black clay. So it's like this black clay, and then I put white underglaze on it, and then I carve this pattern in, and then I carve away all the negative space. So I'm like carving, you know, like that's one part of it, and then I have to like carve away all of that. And this piece got really dry too, which makes it harder.
Yeah, the sound quality to the video you posted was really satisfying. It was just sort of like
ASMR.
Wall.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I waver between like I love working this way, and I also like hate it some days. And these pieces have been like literally wedding these 2 different forms of working in clay that I've been drawn to in the last few years, where I have this like more slow, tedious, repetitive, really insane kind of like time-consuming, slow process of the weaving or the carving, whatever the motif is, and then this like really like chunky, expressive, whatever, going through it and kind of like intersecting it. And so that's coming through in different ways. Like this piece is like something like kind of like going through that mush, this is like this thing kicking the mush. So like the mush is like a reoccurring thing. This is like expanding. It's kind of like constricting and expanding. Yeah, so that's like this current work is trying to combine the fast and the slow in a really like more literal way.
Yeah, when I see like a process like that, I like simultaneously am thinking, wow, that looks very relaxing and like a nice retreat from the more difficult work. But then I also think I would absolutely lose my mind.
Yeah, it's both for me. Like I realize some days I really look forward to just sitting in one place and doing that, but then it's also like a really big commitment with something like the bigger they get, and trying to like think about timing and drying speeds, and because it is so much easier if you can keep it from drying out, but then this thing has been sitting here for like weeks now, and I'll do like hours on it, and it'll be like a little section, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if, why does that matter? Like time spent on something doesn't necessarily equal good art. I know that for a fact. Like sometimes the best things I've made have been like really quick little piles of things. And so I don't know, I think part of this body of work was like embracing what I considered like a guilty pleasure. Like I love the carving, for the most part, I love the carving and the way it looks. It's like drawing on the clay. I get really excited by like the different ways that it, like this piece, how it kind of like shows the form more than if it wasn't there. And also how it's like a grid. But then also, I don't know, like for a while I avoided working this way because I thought it was like too self-indulgent or something, to just kind of sit there and do this pattern over and over again. And so in this recent body of work, I've been just kind of doing it anyway, and doing the guilty pleasure of carving everything and seeing how that goes. And I don't know if it's, we'll see how it works out. This is a chain. I've been doing chains again. I did a bunch of chain pieces in like 2015, and so now I'm like combining the chain with like this mush and seeing how it goes.
Do you think like there's a relationship? Do you think that it's like you're quietly talking about work, like the physical work of making?
Yes, like the
like
act.
Like the act is like the guilty pleasure is the theme. I mean, the guilty pleasure of work.
Yeah. Well, it's also like the absurdity, like to feel, sometimes it's like, I think so I can feel like I'm doing something useful even when I don't know what that might be or what to do. It gives me like a really specific task, and I like that. But I think one of the reasons I use clay is because there's so much like meaning just in the making of the work, or there can be. So I'm like using the process of working with the material for concept. I'm not like, it's not just like I'm making it and then the ideas afterwards, or the ideas before and then I'm executing it. It's like in the actual construction and making, and in different ways that I'm making the piece, there's meaning coming from that.
Right. Yeah, totally. And then it kind of reminds me too, like, and not just working about like women's work specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Do you want to comment?
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah. I think about that a lot, especially there was a show up, or it's still technically up at MoCA in Los Angeles, about pattern decoration, and is a really great show, and it made me think about the work in that context. I think there had been a lot of that in my work anyway, but it made me think about like kind of the political aspect of it in a different way that was exciting. Because I've always brought sewing into the work, and even with this like weaving motif or woven motif, there's this kind of homage to like weaving or like fibers, textiles, and yeah, and that being a very traditionally more, I guess, like associated with femininity, or women's work. And also in that show, they talked about like the like kind of the tedium and ritual and mundanity of domestic life, and like, you know, washing the dishes and ironing the clothes, and like this sort of like the embracing of those rituals, or like this kind of repetitive nature to be like a political gesture. And I really like thinking about that with my work. And
I think it's really interesting to think about now under quarantine, you know, that sort of the idea of that. I feel like people are trying to find things to do. I mean, I read and somebody commented on doing puzzles. They were like, why do puzzles? There's no, like, you don't get anything. It's just, you just do it, and then it ends.
I love puzzles for that reason. Because there's no, I mean, maybe because I do this kind of stuff in my own work, and there seems to be like more, like bigger repercussions, or I don't know, it's just a bigger, the results matter. Whereas like in puzzles, it's purely about these like tedious moments of problem solving rather than like the end result. And so, but yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot in quarantine, because like I've been doing this in the studio, but also I've been knitting, I've been sewing, like kind of doing all of it, and like thinking about this time as a way to slow down a little bit and do those things that we normally don't let ourselves do, or don't give ourselves permission to slow down to do.
Yeah, that's
do you want to just talk a little bit about like what else you do? So like the teaching that you do, and like, because I think it's always interesting to hear how like people stitch it all together.
Yeah. I teach in a couple different ways. I teach part-time at USC, and I also have just recently started doing like an alternative school sort of thing out of my studio called the Clay LA. And the idea behind that was to offer a kind of alternative space for ceramics education for folks that might not be part of academia, or might not want to be part of academia. And I think I also noticed like in Los Angeles, I'm sure in New York too, maybe everywhere, there's been this huge interest in people who don't know ceramics or haven't been trained in ceramics to work in the material, and they often end up at like studios like BKLYN CLAY, which I'm sure like they're lucky to have you guys, but there's also like limit in terms of like scale of what you can do in private studios. And so I thought there was like a kind of a hole where people want to learn more or get more specific technique knowledge or conceptual knowledge, but don't know where to do that necessarily. Like it's not, you know, sometimes you get that through academia, but if you're not a student anymore, then there isn't a place for it. So so a lot of my students have been artists that work in painting and have dabbled in clay, but don't have like training in it. And so like I offered a glaze class where I taught people how to mix glazes, and the idea behind it being that I don't think it's that complicated. I don't think that these these techniques are like that complicated, but they just don't get taught that often for whatever reason. So I did a glaze class. I did a sculpture class where we learned to fire things in parts. So you can make something large, but fire it in your scut kiln. And not like, a lot of it is about self-reliance and self-empowerment in ceramics. I think people, I mean, it's funny because it is like a great community builder, because people need help moving things and glaze advice and stuff like that. And I love the community aspect of it, but I also don't want people to feel like they need people in order to make clay things and ceramic things and fire things. Like, I want people to feel like they can make really amazing things in their garage with a tiny little kiln if they want to. So a lot of it is about like demystifying the ceramic process, empowering people so that they feel like they can do it themselves, but also in that making a community of folks that are all learning it together. So it's been really good. We had to postpone another sculpture class that I was going to offer because the first one was so popular, but then we had to postpone it because of the virus. So.
And then, are you doing that in your studio here, or do you have a separate?
Yeah, I do it in the common space, and just kind of like just wheel things around, set things up, take them down, try to find space for it. So yeah, which was nice too. It was a great commute, to just teach out of here. But it's like a nice balance too, to have the kind of like more traditional model of academia part-time and have this in the other part of time.
Yeah, Cami and I recently talked to like a friend of ours, Keith Simpson, who was kind of talking about some similar stuff with like how ceramics had sort of always been, or so many people teach ceramics by like being the like all powerful like holder of knowledge and then like sort of doling it out. And instead he was talking about trying to come up with ways to like I remember he was actually my professor for like a really short stint, and I just remember him like sending me like reference guides and like trying to actually teach me where to go for information and how to find that stuff, because it's a little harder in New York to do ceramics on your own, but
yeah,
in big parts of the country, like you could have a small kiln in your garage, which is actually like Anders and I used to have a small kiln in our parents' garage, and like it is easy, but it can be so difficult to just like figure out how to build things. And
yeah.
Cool.
I also feel like sometimes you're sort of limited by your own, like it's sort of, I'm like sort of jealous of people that don't know anything about ceramics because they're sort of free to do whatever. And then I feel like, well, you're sort of limited by your own knowledge of it as well. So it's like, how do you balance those two things out?
Yeah, I mean, that's the like complexity or the contradiction in ceramics education, is like you have to like figure out how much you want to know, and then how to like not do all the things that like how to choose processes based on the work rather than what your like the tradition says or what you're supposed to do, or what all these like techniques that are possible in ceramics doesn't mean that like you need to use all of them. And I think that's like something I try to convey through my teaching, is like I really do believe like knowledge is power, and I want people to know, like, 'cause I think if you don't know how to test glaze, if you don't know how to make glaze, you're so limited by like there's some amazing commercial glazes. I'm not saying that that's the way to do it, but to know that there's like other things out there that can totally change things, I think is good to know as an artist, and then you can take it or leave it,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's I mean, you had sort of like pared your stuff down to pretty much just clay and slip when you did that Infinity Loop show. It's cool to see that you're starting to like reintroduce glaze slowly.
Yeah.
And
Actually, I would love for you to talk about your glazing strategy. I feel like a lot of people like you like a lot of people are so horrified by glazing and feel like it's their one chance to like, if it doesn't work, it's
Tammy's really anxious about glazing.
I'm not talking to you. I'm asking for a friend, Julia.
I mean, I think like you have to try to figure out how to make it somewhat enjoyable or like personalize it. I don't know. Like, I think I know people don't like glazing, and I think a big part of that is that it's like, and I still get anxious about it. I think a big part of it is because it feels so final, like you can't undo the glaze. And so what I've been trying to do is take things a step at a time, and I have the privilege of having my own kiln so that I can then refire things if I want to add more. But the problem is you can never really take it away. Like, you can sandblast something if you want to take a shine off, but then it'll be a sandblasted piece, and that's a real big pain in the ass. And like, right. I just I think sometimes I ruin work by overdoing it. And just like a painter would, you know, like I think about glazing a lot like painting. Like, it's just hard because you don't exactly know what it's going to look like. And the more you do it, you kind of get like a sense, or I get a sense of like, okay, I kind of know what this combination is going to do. So I'm going to like, so like these glazes that I have like started kind of remaking in different color schemes. Like I have like a few base glazes with different stains, and I know that from tests and from experience on other works what they will do if I combine them in certain ways. So like, I know what's a good example, like and so I also, that's part of the reason why I'm using this dark clay, because I like having like a dark surface to start with so that I don't feel like I need to like cover anything up. I think part of the problem with glazing is when people feel like they need to like cover something, and that I really think it's helpful for me to think about it as watercolors, since I do like watercolors as a regular thing, to try to imagine how I can get the glazes to do a similar thing. So I'm using colors, and then like I'll use like a blue tone, but over the black it turns really dark, and then I'm putting like a white matte glaze over shiny glazes, so, and all in one firing, so that the white glaze kind of dulls the rest of it and mutes the colors a little bit. So I can show you also on this one. So like the process would be like adding like a red glaze, adding some other purpley glaze, and then adding a white matte glaze over the top of it, and all of them kind of like fuse together to become this whole other surface. So it's like, I'm not just using one glaze. I think that's the other thing, is like I'm using quite a few different glazes at a time in order to hope that a lot of weird and interesting things happen. So I'm like, it's like a combination of like planning and like trying to figure out like what through planning will give unexpected results. So it's like trying to plan for surprise, but not too much surprise. And then if I don't like something, like this piece, I ended up firing again because I didn't think it had enough. And sometimes I'll like think something is done and sit with it for a couple weeks and realize that it's not done and put it through another firing.
And then on a separate question, I was like kind of thinking about your work and scales. Can you talk about how you like like how do you decide what scale you're going, like aside from the fact that there's a big kiln that you can use here and like there, and you're, you know, what you can fit in your kilns or whatever?
I don't really know. I think a lot of it is just like a reaction to what I have made last. I think I end up making a variety of scales. Like I like the work to sort of have a variety in size and scale, and I think it just depends. I don't know. I don't have like I think it depends on the piece. It depends on the project. Like sometimes I'll have a show and I'll want to make big things for a show. Sometimes I'll just have like a new idea. So I don't want to make like a giant thing with a new idea necessarily, because I want to sort of see it in a more like of a manageable personal size before I kind of commit to something giant. And also I sometimes think like when you make something really large in clay, it loses something, or because of the gravity and the way you have to build things at large scale, you just don't have as much freedom as you do with tiny things. Like I was going to show you my little bowl of maquettes, because I think sometimes these like really tiny things are like better than anything, because they're just like, you don't have to think about anything. You just like, totally, it's like drawing.
Cool. These are amazing. I love imagine the hand piece that was in
yeah
oh, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, here's another like but so this is like how a lot of the pieces get started, is like through a little 3D sketch. And I think sometimes these are better than big ones. I don't know, because you don't have to worry as much. You don't have to plan or engineer. So I don't know. I think some of it is just kind of oops. Oh, questioning, like just questioning, I guess. I don't know questioning what, but just questioning things all the time. I think a lot of stuff I make is like my body size. Like even the big ones are about my height. And like the smaller ones are about like my torso. So I think that's probably part of it.
Do you guys want to start opening it up to questions?
Yeah. If anybody has a question, feel free to write it out if you like you could before, but you can also unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. Early on, Andrew Casto said that the chair on wheels is sweet. Did you build that chair?
That shout out to Benjamin Jones, who you guys might know from Alfred. He was an undergrad. Sorry, I plugged my phone in. Ben Jones was my wonderful assistant for a little while, and he made this chair per my request for, sorry, I had to plug in my phone in now. Uh-oh. No, I lost you guys. Sorry, technical problems.
That's okay, it's happened almost to every single one.
Oh, here we go. So that guy, yeah, pretty sweet. He also, he made these cabinet doors on my table so I could put work in there that like maybe I don't want to look at right now.
I knew you were hiding something.
Actually, I was
There's a
going to ask
lot
you.
hiding. This is
I
so
was going to ask you that specific question about what like, and I think it goes back to working in, you know, series or working what you like keep out to look at, to reference for yourself.
Yeah, and that's something else I've like learned over the years is I like things to be like not too cluttered right around where I'm working, because and like move or work out or hide it or bring it somewhere else, so that I'm not feeling sort of like I can easily just feel sort of like limited by my past or like my past thoughts maybe. And I like, especially when like right now I'm kind of like working on this new idea, I really need space like around me to have space to move things forward and to make new things. And so I have learned over the years to try to, just to declutter a little bit. I'd say my studio in grad school was like very cluttered, and I think at the time it worked because I was like making all these things with everything, like accumulating. And now I feel like I need to like really clear out clutter in my mind and in the physical space. And sometimes it goes too far the other way, like I just cleaned for you guys and now I'm feeling like it's a little bit sparse. So I'll probably mess it up a little bit today, but also like safety wise, it's good to not live in a total dust. Like this kind of working creates like a bit of a dust zone. I have a lot of stuff that I keep in storage. So figure out like what to keep and what not to keep, I think, is always the problem as a 3D maker of things. Yeah, good question.
All right.
What other question?
Are you working towards anything?
Khalil.
Are you working towards anything specifically at the moment? Or are you always this prolific in the studio? It looks like you have a lot of stuff going on right now.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to slow down because I don't. I've always made a lot of stuff. I think that's how I like think through like making things and drawing. And so that's also why clay is so and I don't know. So I've been trying to slow down. I've been trying to see this time right now as like maybe I can slow down and not make so many things.
Yeah.
But it's hard because I have like ideas and then I want to do it and I want to make it, and it feels like really pressing, I feel like this like urge to just like see reality and like fear that if I won't make it.
You're kind of I don't know if it's for everybody, but you're kind of coming in and out a little bit. For you guys?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it dropped off there just a little bit.
Oh, whoops.
Just like the last.
Might be my internet.
Yeah, the last couple sentences we kind of got, and I know it was like a brilliant idea, and that we all wanted to know.
Oh no, I'm sure it was just rambling about clay.
That's fast.
Yeah, does anybody else have any questions for Julia? If not, maybe we'll start.
Oh, Zach has one.
Yeah.
Wait, what did he say?
Can you talk about why the smallest works seem the most emotive? Sometimes seem the most emotive.
I think because part of it might be because they're so small and precious, and you can, like, I think miniatures or small things in general are like precious and pull emotion from us, like whenever we look at tiny things. But also I think because there's like that immediacy to making them where they're like really quick gestural sketches, like you can just, there's like an immediacy to them that I think has an emotive quality. Yeah.
I mean, I think our relationship with very small things is probably, in our ancestral DNA. Like we love the things that can fit.
Yeah.
Hands, maybe.
Yeah, like there's like a kind of like a ritual aspect to it also, like traditions of like votives and like offerings and
Totally.
stuff like that.
Anyone else? Oh my gosh. This was so fun. It was so great to see your studio and to see
Thank you.
It's like,
yeah.
It was like, and so generous. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you for asking me, and thanks for everyone for watching. And yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so for anyone who wasn't able to join us, we will be uploading it to YouTube for viewing after. And yeah, I just want to say thanks again for contributing like in this way. It's been so nice to be welcomed into different people's studios all over the place, and this has just been really fun and really generous on your part. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for organizing it. It's a great idea. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Awesome.
Thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Yeah. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.